Did you hear about Aja Wilson's bold claim? The WNBA superstar says she can beat NBA player Josh Hart one-on-one. This isn't just trash talk. It's causing a huge stir in basketball circles.
But this conversation needs to just be stopped at this stage. It's ridiculous.
Wilson isn't just any player. She's a powerhouse, breaking records and collecting awards like it's second nature. But claiming she could take on an NBA pro, that's a whole different ball game. The idea has people raising eyebrows and sparking fiery debates about the gap between WNBA and NBA skill levels. Some are calling it the most outlandish statement in basketball history.
But it doesn't make the statement false, and the reason why this statement has to be made is because of idiots like the Aja Wilson fan base. Like, this statement should not have to be made. This is not beneficial in any way for basketball. The problem is this statement has to be made and people are actually arguing that Aja Wilson would be an NBA player. Aja Wilson not only wouldn't be an NBA player, Aja Wilson would not make any Division I college team.
So what's the deal here? Does Wilson stand a chance, or is this just a attention-grabbing statement? Let's break it down and see what's really going on. You know what's crazy? Aja Wilson thinks she can beat Josh Hart 8-11 in a one-on-one game. Let's talk about that. This whole thing started on a podcast with Josh Hart. Wilson wasn't just joking around. She straight up said she'd win 8-11. And Hart, he just laughed it off like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Josh Hart's reaction? He just laughed it off, brushing it aside with some classic sarcasm. Now you're probably thinking, could she really do it? Let's look at the numbers and see what's really going on here. Wilson's stats in the WNBA are pretty impressive. She's averaging 21 points per game and is considered one of the top players in the league. That's no joke. But then we've got Josh Hart. He's been in the NBA for 14 seasons, averaging 12.2 points per game. And get this, he was even on the USA World Championship team. That's a whole different level of competition. If Josh went up against Aja Wilson, let's be real, he'd dominate.
If you play, you would not get 11 points against Josh Hart if you played to 200. That's not a knock on Aja Wilson. Josh Hart is a really good NBA player. Josh Hart was a starting 5 member on a USA World Championship team. Josh Hart would literally first step, blow by Aja Wilson, jump in the air, and if there's no contact, dunk it, or if there is enough contact, he'd be high enough that's an open layup every single time. Aja Wilson would put the ball on the floor, Josh Hart would tip it. Aja Wilson, the only way she wouldn't get the ball stolen every single time she dribbled it in front of Josh Hart is if you tried to back down Josh Hart. And Josh Hart would stand there.
See the difference? It's not just about skill, it's about physicality too. NBA players are on a whole other level when it comes to strength, speed, and jumping ability. These guys are like superheroes on the court.
Like, the reality of the situation is like, just physically, athleticism wise. Because that's as important as anything in basketball. If skill was all that mattered, you'd see so many Filipinos in the NBA. But skill's not all that matters. Size and athleticism is what matters.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Jeff Teague, another NBA player, jumped into this conversation with some fire. He didn't hold back at all. Teague said Wilson can't beat any NBA player, not one. You might be thinking, isn't that a bit harsh? But Teague's got some facts to back it up.
Like, it's simple biology, especially in a sport where it really matters, like basketball. But obviously Jeff Teague people are attacking Jeff Teague, and this is like, people don't know basketball.
Teague also talked about the physicality in men's basketball. He said, it's just the physicality, you know what I'm saying? And he's right, the strength, speed, and vertical leap of NBA players are on a whole different level.
It's been made, and people are actually arguing that Aja Wilson would be an NBA player. Aja Wilson not only wouldn't be an NBA player, Aja Wilson would not make any Division I college team. She is a 6'4" center. And that is she is a 6'4" center with no athleticism. If she played men's basketball, she is a 6'4" center with zero athleticism, who I'm not sure can dunk, and is a pretty poor 3-point shooter.
So what do you think? Could Wilson really take on Hart, or is this just a case of confidence gone too far? Either way, it's a wild claim, that's for sure.
Aja Wilson, every basket that she would score against Josh Hart would be lucky. And that's not a knock on Aja Wilson, but that's just a reality situation.
Wilson's confidence might be sky high, but Jeff Teague's about to bring it crashing down. Think you know the gap between WNBA and NBA players? Teague's got some stats that'll make you think again about what it takes to compete at the top. Teague didn't hold back in this debate. Sounds harsh, right? But Teague's got the facts to back it up. Let's talk about NBA players for a second. Jeff Teague made a solid point. Most of these guys were already stars before they even stepped onto an NBA court. court. He highlighted that even the bench players, not the starters, were dropping 40 points a game in high school and averaging 20 in college. Think about that for a moment. These players were built to dominate long before they hit the pros. But here's the interesting part. Teague's saying it's not about gender. It's about levels of play. There's a huge gap between college players and the NBA, not to mention the WNBA. He even said the best college players are better than Wilson. That's not a dig at her skills. It's just how tough the competition is in men's basketball.
Jeff Teague is the same height as A'ja Wilson. If they played to 11, if Jeff Teague really wanted to beat her 11-0, he could beat her 11-0. Jeff Teague was an all-star.
Did you catch that? Even Teague could take down A'ja Wilson one-on-one. This is such a strange conversation. You don't see women in other sports comparing their athleticism to men. It's almost always basketball. It just doesn't feel right or make much sense.
And that's the only reason this is a conversation. Nobody would be talking about this. It would be like if Serena Williams came out and said she'd beat Roger Federer. Like, Serena Williams, I'm pretty sure Serena and Venus played against like the 200 ranked player in the world. And he beat them both 6-love. And he was like, or he beat them both 6-1 and was like, oh, it could have been 6-love if I was trying. Like, back to back. Like, that's just, and that's not anything against Williams. It's just, they're incredible. It's like McEnroe, when McEnroe got shunned for saying Serena Williams would be the 600 best male tennis player. It's a fact. And that's not saying Serena Williams isn't one of the greatest tennis players of all time, because she is. But like, we gotta stop lying about sports to keep feelings.
Forget A'ja Wilson for a second. There's another WNBA superstar who got a reality check so hard, it sent her running to the kitchen. And it wasn't even against an NBA player. It was her high school freshman brother. What happened next? You're not gonna believe. You've heard of Cheryl Miller, right? This woman was a basketball beast. Some people say she was even better than A'ja Wilson. Her stats, off the charts. We're talking about a player who dominated college basketball, led her team to 2 NCAA championships, and racked up awards like they were going out of style. But here's where things get really interesting. Cheryl had a brother who made it to the NBA. Not just any brother, we're talking about Reggie Miller. Yeah, that Reggie Miller. The one who torched the New York Knicks and became one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. Now, picture this. One day, Cheryl decides she's gonna play Reggie one-on-one. She's feeling confident, thinking she can take her little brother. Big mistake. Huge. Cheryl walks out to the court ready to show Reggie who's boss. But then something happens that throws her completely off guard. She looks up at Reggie and he's not so little anymore. In fact, he's towering over her at 6'7". And remember, this is when Reggie's just a high school freshman. Can you imagine the shock? Cheryl's standing there probably thinking, when did this happen? Wasn't he just a little kid? But she doesn't back down. She still thinks she can take him. Spoiler alert, she couldn't. What happens next is the stuff of family legends. Cheryl goes for a shot, thinking she's got this in the bag. But Reggie, he's not having it. He blocks her shot so hard, so decisively, that Cheryl doesn't even try to keep playing. Nope, she goes straight to the kitchen, game over. Cheryl herself tells the story. I just remember I was in the kitchen sitting down with mom. I never ever played Reggie one-on-one again. Can you believe that? One of the greatest women's basketball players of all time, and she's running to the kitchen after playing her high school brother. Now, you might be thinking, if Cheryl Miller couldn't even beat her high school freshman brother, what chance does A'ja Wilson have against an NBA player? It's a fair question. We're not just talking about any player here. We're talking about Cheryl Miller, a woman who some experts say would have been the best player in the WNBA if she'd played in that era. This story really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? It shows just how big the gap can be between men's and women's basketball, even at the highest levels. It's not about skill. Cheryl had skill for days. It's about the raw physical differences that come into play. So the next time you hear someone talking about WNBA players taking on NBA players, remember Cheryl Miller's kitchen retreat. It's a reality check that even the greatest women's players have faced. The WNBA has incredible athletes doing amazing things, but comparing them to NBA players, that's a whole different ballgame. When you compare A'ja Wilson to men's college players, things get pretty wild. Could A'ja Wilson make a men's college team? As great as she is in the WNBA? Probably not. The men's game is just too different. Here's something crazy.
She is the height of a point guard. She is a point guard who plays center, who isn't an elite shooter, and can't guard on the perimeter, wouldn't be able to guard in the perimeter, wouldn't be able to guard in the post in any level of men's basketball. Like, she would be a D3 rotation player if she was in the men's. And by the way, like, I think Age is one of the greatest of all time. But that's the reality of the statement. She would be a bench player at a bad D3 school.
Wilson is 6'4", making her a center in the WNBA. In men's basketball, that's guard size. Imagine Wilson trying to guard a 7-foot center. Total mismatch. Plus, there are basics you need in men's college ball. Dunking is one, and Wilson can't dunk. Her three-point shooting isn't great either, which is a problem in men's college basketball where they shoot threes better than in the WNBA. You might think, but Aja's so skilled. True, but men's basketball is on another level. Some guys in Ireland's second-tier league could probably beat Wilson one-on-one. That's not to knock Wilson's talent. It just shows how athletic men's basketball is.
Like, what's his name? Colin Cowell plays for Carrick Macross. 21-0 him against Aja Wilson every single time. Dude that I coached until he left our team was 6'9", East Baying on the fast break. Could shoot a little bit. Blocked everything in sight from like D1 level guards trying to size him up on the perimeter, and I'm like, this is the Irish second tier. Yeah, obviously. That's not a knock at Aja Wilson. Aja Wilson's still one of the greatest female basketball players ever. And like when it's all said and done, these dudes are playing in the Irish League and she's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But it doesn't make the statement false, and the reason why this statement has to be made is because of idiots like the Aja Wilson fan base. Like, this statement should not have to be made. This is not beneficial in any way for basketball.
It's not just Wilson. No WNBA player could keep up in the NBA. The strength, speed, and jumping ability are just different. But here's the thing. Does it matter? The WNBA is awesome in its own way. These women are amazing athletes doing incredible things. Comparing them to NBA players is pointless. They're different games.
It's like, you can't talk about women's basketball in a negative light without being misogyny, apparently, if you're a man. Aja Wilson's really good. And like, these are the dumb conversations that set women's basketball back. And by the way, like, Jeff T doesn't have to say this if Aja Wilson doesn't say Josh Hart disrespected her. And that's the only reason this is a conversation. Nobody would be talking about this.
So when you hear talk about WNBA players versus NBA players, remember, it's not about who's better. It's about enjoying each league for what it is. The WNBA has great athletes, exciting games, and its own style. That's worth celebrating, right? So what's the real story here? Aja Wilson's an amazing player, no doubt about it, but comparing her to NBA players? That's like comparing apples and oranges. The NBA is a whole different world, with levels of athleticism that are hard to even imagine.
The NBA. But skill's not all that matters. Size and athleticism is what matters. Like, the reality is like, look, just based on what my physical profile when I was 18, I would have been a WNBA player. Not saying I'm better than any of them, by the way. All better at basketball, but just physical, if you were allowed to do that. There's a reason why there's a WNBA.
But you know what? It doesn't really matter. Instead of these wild comparisons, why don't we appreciate the WNBA for what it is? It's a league full of incredible athletes doing amazing things on the court. Did you know the WNBA's viewership is actually growing? The 2022 season averaged 1.2 million viewers per game. That's a 22% increase from the year before. Next time you watch a WNBA game, remember this. These women are the best of the best. Period. They're pushing the boundaries of women's basketball every single day. Even NBA stars like LeBron James are taking notice. He said, "The WNBA is a great league, and the women are incredible athletes. They deserve all the respect and support we can give them." And you know what? He's absolutely right.